Hello, YouTubers, world. This is about geopolitics. It's bigger than, greater than, more finite than. It has to do with active relativity to geopolitics in ways that are preventing us from appreciating people A through Z. Otherwise, that body is sensed, even if it has a majority of people, even if it has a majority of countries. We have to use the hyper evidential to observe this. Part of that involves a discernment of and appreciation of how nature uses the and to reason positive or negative is positive. To the identity, the hyper simultaneous will only stay positive unto itself. All exceptions and exception nature that appear to be a demonstration of other. Uh, you're leaving out the value of a special difference. Not just Earth's a special difference, hyper-additionally ours. And ours as humanity, it's also as increasingly since semi-ancient times as systems tactile ulterior from the one that the ancients revealed. Were led by before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced. This is increasingly more probable. So where they're making value treatments, that's because they came through campuses that were criminally foreign influenced. How they got away with this, they have torture rolls. They have readings of there are ways to say, speak I see, to say that you see evidences or you don't see evidence. And with the exceptions, with the exceptions. For example, when they say evidence, that there's evidence that our founders had roles with slavery, like George Washington. Our founders had to hide their actual motivations because there was a breaching method against against what people could say and think, so they could find out through themselves, because they made that relied upon the natures of industries there. So we have logic experts that are still tactically delusions right fluent through our country. One of the ways they get away with this is by putting fake things into databases every campus we went to and making connected uses of it. They have the religious spots used tactical ulterior from how their very books tell them to be used thought. They pretend conversations with people to pretend they have mental diagnosis on a mass scale. Now, the only reason people miss this is because the interbranch, foreign and domestic, and the difference of that overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and where and how they have, in other words, they have acting coaches, and they have military police forms that are KKK themed, black themed, and because they're switching names. And they're playing games where they have child defenders with this. I told you, every campus I went to has people involved with this. You ask them nice, they have a psychopath calmness. They have psychopath aggression since founding, pounding drums. So they've been, they assign the identities of the branch of government. Therefore, they assign good people to be evil before America's founders were even born. That was sustained against the colonists. Then it was sustained against Native Americans and the colonists, and the truths about how it was being sustained against the Native Americans through the colonists. The breaching method was measuring and maintaining ways to lock it down. They're going to self-value that in the future too, which is self-valued now, including grouped countries of the species name, of the names of the human volume. So all humanity voicings are either fake, entertaining the fake, criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and or negative treatments, in collusion to keep this from being discerned, the identity of relationship to itself. All things, box things, individually grouped in together, criminally foreign influenced by a breaching method with relativity to it. As part of our answers, how it has been left out of the answers of American history is also hyper evidential. So there is that torture method we should have used the most overt means to observe, like that torture and extortion method of Native Americans. First of all, you have to have it in sequence. And then how sickly distinctly they had slavery, you know, and how the white and black is used to measure, and when they bring up white and black pupils, whites of eyes, we have answers from nature. See, when they're pretending the value of homework, certain type of victim, hyper victim. For example, each age and nature of campus, the difference of them, that is implied by this method, that knew that the voices there would need to hide things. So the torture method involved containing the value nature systems. As it caused negative value nature progressions, acts in nature, acts like predicate acts, nature's like criminal insidiousness, wrongdoers. I'm not even a lawyer, not even police form, not a judge, but we could use how there were tactically delusions wrought with the color black. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, millions, the whole species body over can convict things like this properly. And so, well, when we do this and we pay attention, what all formal convictions have been sick, and the differences between the good judges, the best ones, and the worst, most evil overtly / insidiously, simultaneously tactically delusions wrought. The quality aspects of fact-achieving nature. See, one thing they share is the nature of debate. They pretend that voting means what it doesn't, so they can keep blamed on other things, others ourselves. Why? How? Really? In other words, they're making even the differences with who's making guilt. The courts have had collusions with crime scenes since founding, and the differences between that, because they don't want, it's right where everyone doesn't want to have collusions. Otherwise, they're sentenced for voicing it, because then you're going to be using a quality of fact-achieving nature that uses truths that come with revelations. For example, but only when they're not being used for lies with the identity of logic. They're not relying on other people's lies, because nature will show us. See, everyone could believe and agree to lie about what came first, but nature will continue to demonstrate it. And the longer those demonstrations are missed, the longer lease of Hades is forced. Humanity's a special difference with Earth, but distinctly from Earth, but also non-distinctly and simultaneously, but hyper simultaneously also. Our identity of relationship to itself that is positive is forced away from here. Lease of Hades. We are automatically temporary / lasting positive to an extent, but our quality of diffusion is where and how more forever nature is being made. This is not only more probable than what has been taught regarding the history of each of the sciences, and so therefore the languages. English was revealed to teach this. So all parts of it have three identities of possession / hyperpossession over it. And so, for example, there are 6 names for the verb, but they are about the 1 / 3 / 5 identities of relationship it has to itself. The extent of the hypersimultaneous that we have when we have any subject or list of subjects, which is appreciation of the identity of the simultaneous, which is distinct from the hypersimultaneous. The verb and the subject, for example, the parts of speech of languages they are about the invisible but still discernible. Why and how? The verb, we need to appreciate it with more than one name, with English grammar. By the way, English and the other languages are reliant upon themselves when they're taught right. We're appreciating where and how the sciences share an identity, and where and how they appear not to. That's how it's leading. It's showing us how it does anywhere. It uses exception nature, the identity of the hypersimultaneous, per science, the identity that revealed Why, even if it's not, I'm not saying it's perfect. Obviously, it's not a person. It's an identity of simultaneous nature that is not the other animals. It's not the insects. It is not humanity, but it is showing us there is a hyper invisible there. There's a hyper there are. It's the reason why we have to appreciate the three ways bonded. It's for appreciation of present participle, a name for a verb. The past participle, a name for a verb, also relative to time / forever nature no. And a gerund. A gerund is formed when you put ing after a verb. The reason we name this particular verbal, where a verb is inflected to where and to how it can't be used as a predicate. Another name for a verb. See, so there are distinct identities of hyperpossession as a complete identity, just as there are cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall /s, and appreciation of gases, and appreciation of water and its elements, with the appreciation of looking at a cell, looking at cells and how they connect, and there's this body of value coming through it, where its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that are equally only increasing as value. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing. Vaccine. It's where and how the ancient snow people work. This is hyper program, hyper intelligence. This is what our founders asked us to use, nature's. So free speech is often slander that is sickly distinctly against our founders and ourselves, every modern country's founders. Already from semi-ancient times, before modern religion's messengers were even born, the sciences had already become criminally foreign influenced. Therefore, the names of the sciences and the names of people increasingly, and of those volumes. In other words, humanity's difference, individual body of species bodies, species body of individual bodies, grouped difference, ages, areas, sexes, mother and father, and the third, in other words, nature shows us how to best describe it and what it comes down to all the ways. The ancients revealed its identity of relation to itself and the value of that. So these three parts of time are about, in other words, the gerund is if you read the definitions on a present participle, they will say a present participle is always formed by adding ing to a verb. So that's always they use that word, constant. So a gerund is constantly a present participle. But I could say I had ran. I had been running. You could use it sometimes as a past participle. But there is another constant or variable, relativity. Same way, with reasons greater than, more finite than, and with relativity to what is active, the active value of reason too, which is identity of relationship to itself and the value of that, which is also comes with its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that. Even if something is made up, there are 5 distinct identities of hyperpossession over the smallest finite detail, over all group details, and over the simultaneous. It goes with this science how there is individual other species bodies too, even the insects. And where there are exceptions in exception nature, that again, it's constantly showing. This is one of the things that identity is constantly, is as exceptions, the exception nature as it is. It is the thing that completes everything. And so this is about forever nature, because the value of truth was how what unfolded actually per its system. before before our founders, but also before modern religions. That's why they were up in arms. Already there was a possession over the human quality aspects of factory nature, therefore names uses. And relativity to the real cause of negative value nature progression is acts of nature that no one fathomed. This is more probable, increasingly. It is increasingly more practical. And it means all we, is one thing we could agree about and to use where there are needs to blame. To keep those blamed on a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. Because also recorded manifest clearer than day. Counters to criminal enterprises and to criminal insidiousness itself have stayed collusions with the identity racketeering worse than war crimes method. So we hear uses of phrases like war crimes, but we have no reference. No one ever allows anyone to know all the ways that the crafters of uses of words like in agreements or differences with words like war crimes that can be used to show how those things that every body of the human body, everywhere we are across the globe, even if someone's in space. In other words, there are things we agree about. The only reason we don't is because the syntax, we have entertained what we can't. Impractical reasons, pretended practical, to use a phrase of Immanuel Kant. Practical reason. He also uses the phrase pure reason. There are three distinct identities of invisible but still discernible that are equally valued. For example, as the subject, the predicate, in the sentence, and as the difference between the invisible but still discernible and the hyper-invisible but still discernible. Invisible but still discernible reason comes with hyper-invisible but still discernible. Hyper and simultaneous nature. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, we have the hyperscope. Not a legitimate body of law spoke for what really caused. Not a legitimate body spoke for what will cause shootings in cities or anywhere on the scale. They had collusions on off those campuses, on off and the difference of that is used. This facilitated people to collusions with itself. It measured and maintained what can't defend itself with practical reason applications. At countries A through Z, see suits and ties and counters to them as collusions and tactically delusions wrought with factory nature quality aspects of nature's black pupils. So they prevent us from using short words on the mass scale, the intelligence of our countries. They pretend people make conspiracy theories and they direct others to do that. They get away with it because they've been stacking predicate acts with facts at every campus we went to. Fake ties, fake natures of ties to ourselves, and as their roles with crime scenes. So the FBI and the C.I.A. have roles with a Ray Reynolds, with a Harris family, a Kevin Harris, involved with leaders of kids who were involved with child abuses, and people on Quinnipiac University. We're clearer than they too. How they keep the presidents hurting each other because of through the agencies and differentially the foreign, in other words, because and the motivation that needs to have appearing other, even to themselves. Everything is traceable to that breaching method, black pupils. Like that. Humanity, while space means come out of nowhere. We have to address everywhere at once the ways we can discern. The suburbs were designed tactically denatured for torture and for extortion of our presidents, beginning with George Washington and with James Madison It was designed for their factory nature slavery. But nature is being used by the interbred. Oh, come on. Put it in writing. Yeah, get our name in paper. Get our one name in paper on paper. They're preventing mandated law. They have been through time using evidence as treatment. Well, we're just going to look at this. Even though they have all the evidences, they're leaving out phrases like criminally foreign influence, criminal insidiousness. How are you going to teach about American history or any modern history without that phrase? How are you going to teach about law? How are you going to teach about religion, therefore? Boxing, I teach us things, but law. So the reason that lawyers were supposed to get a license is to be lawyers. That was measured and maintained before that. Identities of jobs A through Z. This thing was already in possession of the campuses of the Republic system. There had already been long sustained criminal re-engineering of itself and rolls with that. Increasingly incapable of having what's actually discernible about the present, about the past, or what is actually the value of to come. So the suburbs were designed tactically denatured and for the torsion and extortion of our founders, as they actually communicated for us to understand. For example, Connecticut news locations, WFSB, WTNH, and Fox Connecticut News. Distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, they have roles also with names next to their locations, like the FBI next to the location of WTNH in New Haven. They have roles with digital crime methods, with foreign and domestic bodies, including leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. They have roles with psychiatry, tactically delusions, wrought black pupils. They're fabricating conversations, therefore evidences as collusions with crime scenes, putting fake motives too, because they've been using medical locations. See, there are mental health locations, and where they force, like where people yell or something like that, something goes down, they bring them to the because sometimes there's physical damages too. The medical locations. See, there are police forms who are also doctors of mental health and stuff like that. They've been using with their whole family members. Foreign and domestic military, they share uses of the hospitals as collusions with overt criminal enterprises, plural, private ones at the same time. And in the insidiousness of A through Z, and the difference of that are used consciously with all sides in criminal and civil cases, the names in them, and their sources on all sides, and the names of the interbranch that work there. In other words, and the difference between that, their family members, all apparent motivations. See, this is a game that is increasingly stacking us to faked and changed communications with others. It's a wire crime acts and methods. Weathersfield Police Department families, retired and standing, the police chiefs and detectives, like a Detective Dillon, has a whole bunch of people like Annie Dillon, and how she switches to the name Annie, involved with judges and prosecutors with New Britain Superior Court, Hartford Courts, Connecticut District Court, a whole bunch of ways. Also on off Fox Connecticut News, involved with people involved with Syria leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since, per the roles intercampuses with predicate acts with facts, and identity theft, fraud, slanders, and uses of interreligious nutmegs. And oh well, why would you call it? Why don't you just talk nice to them then? I talk in other words, respond for them, fix them, follow. I tried to do that, and they don't do it. They don't. They want to have a fake conversation, fake. They want to pretend that what they were told in backgrounds doesn't have roles with as evidence here, and that's what has, because we have all little cowards. So I had to force people to call the police because I caught them through time since I was a kid with these people. They use crime methods, our agencies, intercities, where they affect confessions about a whole bunch of things, time that fill in the past. In other words, they're putting fake things in the databases every year. Then there are confessions to other locations. They're lying about their motivation. We can observe this. These are people on off the World Trade Center and the spots next to it long term, leading up to it, contemplate all relative predicate acts roles and methods of them roles. and then short term too, a bunch of different ways too in Manhattan, and with the Ninth Circuit Court next to it, as names who have rules with all sides in criminal and civil cases, and Saudis warned them that they did not want anything to do with the psychiatrists and the people involved with psychiatry on and off Central Connecticut State University, and with the families that live next to them. They have rules with foreign and domestic intelligence, unmarked police forms, and officers like involved with and judges and prosecutors have been planting evidences and roles with child abusers and elderly offenders, and in foreign and domestic military on off their roles like a Gill family on Covington Street recorded fest demonstrate confirmed they have roles with the intelligence community and saying different things so people could go back and recall things because they have judges and prosecutors that were involved with them, has something to do with their roles with East Hartford locations and intelligence there, and you know how they have all kinds of sexual differences and all kinds of racial differences and religious differences used for sense and sensibilities to hide behind, not honestly while being and having been used remotely. So people die in wars, and people died in revolution because to end that. But see, but we won't have that ended because we have a complete remote possession of our identities individually grouped together for us. When people use our name, America, or they say, "Oh, well, that's how they have to talk." Well, I mean, well, no, it's complicated. In other words, where it's complicated and where it's simple is a tactical terror from how nature tells us to describe this black people. So we're going to deal with the predicate acts with facts that we could roles, needs, and natures. A through Z, speaking formally for the law, having spoken formally for the law, for things like security, like strategy. There's no strategy. Oh, they're right down. In other words, these are collusion. Russians, Americans, Ukraine, they have collusions with each other and with all the other countries, with psychiatry, for example, with your uses of hospitals for worse than war crimes. A whole bunch of people with the name Oliveri, too, and a Joshua Stryker involved on off Trinity College, pretending they want privacy because they've been planting evidences with former director of the FBI, a whole bunch of federal criminals before they got caught on and off campuses behind people's backs. The people aren't even in the same grades, never even see each other around. Some of them make there was one exception, in a day later. So they do things with the foreign and our domestic to make descriptions down the road, including Hartford courts and the Britain courts. I found all those people were from Connecticut District Court too, and people on off the state judicial branch offices of Connecticut, on off the state corrections offices. But these are people on off the Ninth Circuit Court right next to the World Trade Center, with all sides in the cases, and people from inside the court, post-dated documents from inside the Ninth Circuit Court. And the news planted fake stuff then and since. They've been, because their locations and ones next to them are involved. So they have readings of statutes that are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, and have been collusions, like with how they could hear things in your car, what you say, and searching for keywords and their motivations planting. No, in other words, they're putting hyper additional real motivations, but they're not the real motivations, including where and how they have family members involved with such. So Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College has roles of people that planted predicate acts on my street with the intelligence community. In Wethersfield, as ones who planted evidences on Covington Street in New Britain and in Hartford. And it wasn't per my influence, and all exceptions, exception nature. They use that criminally for it too, because they're using exceptions and exception nature with reason. Use tactical terror from how nature uses it. So, for example, I too agree that we should get closer to a gold standard. But more importantly than that, like for example, with Judge Napolitano, suggest we get into gold. Judge Napolitano knows more about economies than me. and in other words, economic variables and constants. But some ways I know more about economic variables and constants than him, and then any other judge. For example, and they need to use nature to hide this because it's hyper evidentially recorded. The courts leading up to the World Trade Center attack with the FBI, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, he's one of the ones involved with people with the name Scalora, also with wire crimes with Wethersfield Police. Now, these are police departments like Newington Police and Rocky Hill Police Departments have roles of people with the name Colo and O'Brien and Rick C.M. Faglione, who have drugs and medicines crimes with wire crime roles with a Brian Silver and a Brendan Leahy, intercampuses, intercities, and with New Britain courts judges and Hartford courts judges and their family members and intimate ties, foreign and domestic military leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed it has something to do with their roles of people all along Two-Rod Highway / Hangdog Lane and the conjunctions to that and to that, which one of those conjunctions is Route 3. And a conjunction to that is the state judicial branch offices, which is increasingly tied to people who have been planting evidences and fake motivations where and how investigators are used and have been used remotely. At Hartford Hospital, they attached me to fake conversations through the mail too about with me and my family since as roles with the Leahy family with this and with judges and prosecutors and their family members. Leading up to the World Trade Center in that context and since. They've been using military roles, foreign and domestic, with West Hartford and New Britain locations, like around the campuses. Has something to do with people that tied to the that Target building with a Brian Silver, who's one of the ones with New Britain Superior Court and Connecticut District Court, who are involved planting evidences with the names on off the World Trade Center attack in the buildings next to it, in the leading up to and in the World Trade Center attack context. These are people involved, a whole bunch of people tied with times predicate acts roles and natures used with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and foreign domestic military. They use corners of streets and they use their roles with shopping centers and the people that work with shopping centers. And it has something to do with Central Connecticut State University through time, has roles intercities with child campuses. Now I found out it's also Trinity College people with tied to a Joshua Stryker, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Wethersfield Police have been switching and forging names with the Hartford Police families. One's named O'Brien, and there are other ones. They have their Facebook pages involved into branch. New Britain Superior Court has passion crimes to hide after the World Trade Center attack, and that was before a principal child abuser was caught as one of the ones involved with other principal who had a daughter who reportedly was intimately tied to a Kevin Harris, who has his mother involved interstates with drugs and medicines crimes with little kids, and sexual and medical and identity theft and frauds, fake motivations planted, federal evidence, collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. No, make sure they don't pretend to know me. And these are people that from each of the campuses I went to. I had one. Ray Reynolds. The only time I ever saw him around the school in my life was when I was in 1 year in kindergarten. So he's one of the ones involved with the names on my street with the Wethersfield Police, forging and switching names. Only said the name Cololo. After I need a response for the Bob Chase, has a Phil Cololo, increasingly involved with